On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in a small bunker, marking the total collapse of the Nazi regime. At the Auschwitz concentration camp in what is now Poland, one man was frantically erasing every trace of himself. He was the angel of death, Dr. Josef Mengele, the physician who tortured and murdered tens of thousands of Jewish people through brutal human experiments. Knowing his crimes would earn the harshest sentence if he were ever tried, Mengele asked himself whether he could escape the world's most elite manhunts. By the late 1950s, Buenos Aires, Argentina, was a modern, bustling capital, but behind the bright lights, the city hid a secret. Though officially neutral during World War II, Argentina quietly favored the Axis. It kept diplomatic and trade ties with Germany, allowed Nazi propaganda to circulate, and even permitted German use of Argentine territory for intelligence operations. The roots of the special bond between the two countries ran back to the early 20th century. Argentina's booming agricultural economy needed labor, and millions of Italians and Germans immigrated, seeking better lives. The newcomers quickly integrated and contributed to national growth. Italians in trade and urban construction, Germans in industry, education, and engineering. By 1914, roughly 60% of Argentines were immigrants or their descendants, forming influential communities in major cities like Buenos Aires, Cordoba, and Mendoza. The Nazis believed they held strategic leverage, promises of huge post-war benefits for Argentina: trade deals, industrial investment, infrastructure, and a stronger international profile. But in 1945, as the war's outcome became clear, Argentina abruptly declared war on the Axis only a month before Japan's surrender. The gesture had little to do with fighting fascism. It helped pave the way for a covert program to rescue wanted war criminals. Argentine officials saw advantage in sheltering them. Soon after WWI ended, the U.S. and the Soviet Union squared off in the Cold War. Juan Perón, Argentina's president, believed the Third World War might erupt around 1948. If that happened, he thought Argentina could play kingmaker, leaning toward whichever side looked dominant. Many South American governments entertained similar calculations. Former Nazi officials, scientists, engineers, and spies could significantly bolster national power, so secret rat lines were opened to usher them in. Allied intelligence called this escape network red lines, or simply the rat line. Likening the fugitives to cornered rats, two main routes began in Germany. The first ran through Spain to Argentina, the second routed fugitives from Germany to Rome, and then Genoa, Italy, where they boarded ships across the Atlantic to South America. At certain flashpoints, way stations in Arab countries were used to increase safety. An Austrian bishop, Alois Hudel, was among the earliest architects of these routes. He supported Anschluss and framed his aid to Nazi war criminals as protecting his compatriots from enemy vengeance. The classified records from Brazil and Chile suggest up to 9,000 Nazis and collaborators fled to South America. Brazil took in 1,500 to 2,000, Chile about 500 to 1,000. In Argentina more than 5,000, including high-priority war criminals accused of crimes against humanity. One of them was Josef Mengele, the Angel of Death, born March 16, 1911, in Günzburg, Bavaria, during Germany's turbulent aftermath of World War I and the putative Versailles settlement. Economic collapse, unemployment, and hyperinflation fueled resentment. Radical politicians promised to restore order and pride. In the early 1930s, Mengele studied medicine and philosophy at the University of Munich. He was captivated by Hitler's speeches and the pseudoscience of eugenics, believing society could be cleansed through selective breeding and elimination of the weak. He embraced the myth of an Aryan master race and the dehumanization of Slavs, Jews, and Roma. In 1935, he earned a Ph.D. in anthropology with a thesis on mandibular morphology, then joined the Institute for Hereditary Biology and Racial Hygiene in Frankfurt. He entered the Nazi Party in 1937, the SS in 1938, and when war broke out in 1939, he served as a frontline physician, winning Iron Cross first and second class. A severe injury in late 1940 took him off the front. He was reassigned to Auschwitz. Auschwitz, in German-occupied Poland, evolved from a small POW facility into a vast complex by 1943. With three main parts: Auschwitz I Administrative Center, barracks, early detention facilities; Auschwitz II Birkenau, the extermination camp; and Auschwitz III Monowitz forced labor. For prisoners, arrival meant stepping into hell. On the platform, SS doctors selected new arrivals. A few were sent to labor. A few to special purposes like experiments, most to Birkenau's gas chambers. Most camp doctors dreaded selections, knowing each gesture sent someone to die, usually by Zyklon B gas. Mengele was different. He reveled in it, volunteered for extra shifts, and treated the platform like a hunting ground for ideal specimens to feed his depraved curiosity. Soon after he arrived, a gangrenous disease called noma erupted among malnourished children. Instead of fighting the outbreak, he saw an opportunity for observation, isolating infected children, meticulously recording symptoms, photographing faces as tissue decayed, testing unproven drugs regardless of side effects, and ordering executions when bodies failed for his purposes. Organs went into formalin and then to SS medical institutes in Austria for further study. Disease outbreaks were frequent in the overcrowded, filthy camp: tuberculosis, malaria, typhus. In July 1942, during a typhus flare, Mengele sent 600 Jews into the gas chambers to sterilize the block and make way for new arrivals, a cycle repeated across barracks. Far from punishment, he was commended for controlling disease. By late 1944, mass murder continued even as food ran out. Mengele's pet obsessions ranged from dwarfism to heterochromia, different colored eyes. Witnesses testified he drew blood and tissue, even removed eyes for Berlin labs, and ejected dyes to change eye color. Above all, he fixated on twins as keys to heredity. Twins were better fed and clothed than average inmates, but suffered exhaustive measurements, endless procedures, chemical trials, and sometimes simultaneous killings followed by comparative autopsies. Chillingly, he could appear gentle with children, who called him Uncle Pepe, a veneer that masked fanaticism and cruelty. In early 1945, the Red Army advanced. Crematoria were blown up from January 1st onward. Prisoners able to walk were forced west on death marches. Mengele gathered instruments and papers and fled. The Soviets liberated Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, discovering an inferno of corpses. Mengele briefly served as a doctor at Grossrosen, then fled again as the front moved. He ditched his SS uniform, blended into a field hospital, and when interrogated, gave his real name yet went unrecognized. Many SS men had their blood group tattooed. Mengele had refused, claiming any permanent mark would mar his body. His status and personal vanity had inadvertently helped him evade identification. The Allies launched the Nuremberg trials in November 1945 with judges from the US, UK, France, and the USSR. Evidence of genocide documents, photographs, film, survivor testimony was overwhelming. In October 1946, 12 top Nazis were sentenced to death, others to prison. A few were acquitted for lack of proof. Mengele was not in the dock. While he appeared repeatedly in indictments and reports for atrocious human experimentation, he knew he was now a globally wanted war criminal. He drifted around Germany under a false identity based on an acquaintance named Fritz Ullmann, altered to Fritz Hallmann, and took farm work in southern Germany. At first he behaved, earning trust, then bitterness surfaced. He mocked the Allies as crusaders, derided the post-war order, and predicted Germany's resurgence. U.S. investigators even visited his home, but his wife claimed he died on the Eastern Front, and the case went cold. The Mengele family, owners of a prosperous agricultural machinery firm, sent him money. After Nuremberg, more SS men were being exposed, arrests mounted. In April 1949, Mengele slipped across the Alps to the South Tyrol, a Rhineland hub. With clandestine help, he obtained an International Red Cross ID in Rome under the alias Helmut Greger, a carpenter from Bolzano, and May secured papers from the Argentine consulate. In June 1949, aboard the North King, he crossed the Atlantic to Buenos Aires. He started as a carpenter and hotel handyman in the suburbs, but quickly leveraged his polish and family connections to join the Mengele Company's sales operations, handling orders, quality checks, and later serving as a representative in Paraguay. With steady funds, he moved downtown, bought into a carpentry shop, and in 1956 brazenly applied at the West German Embassy for a certified copy of his birth certificate, testing whether anyone still remembered him. Bureaucracy sailed through. Remarkably, he got residency under his real name and even a West German passport in Paris, allowing a reunion with family in Switzerland. By then, he had divorced his first wife in 1954. He began a relationship with Martha, the widow of his late brother, visited Günzburg without being recognized, and in September 1956 returned to Buenos Aires. To obtain an Argentine ID under Josef Mengele, Martha and her son joined him. They married in 1958, surrounded by other Nazi fugitives. They lived in a villa by the Rio de la Plata among ardent Nazi sympathizers. Mengele displayed a bust of Hitler and a swastika in the garden pool. He mingled at lavish parties as a successful machinery executive. Still, authorities eventually took notice. He opened an unlicensed clinic called for Pharma in Buenos Aires, specializing in illegal abortions. A woman died after a procedure in 1954. He bribed a judge, and the death was ruled a natural condition. The turning point came in 1959. A household employee overheard that the factory owner's son was a doctor living in South America, possibly the infamous war criminal. The tip reached prosecutors. Investigators gathered records, cross-checked Nazi SS escapees. And on May 25, 1959, a Freiburg court issued a warrant for Mengele's arrest on war crimes and crimes against humanity. At the same time, Nazi hunters pressed West Germany to act. 1. Hermann Langbine, a survivor who had worked as a clerk in the Auschwitz infirmary and witnessed Mengele's experiments, helped form the International Auschwitz Committee in 1954 to collect testimony and evidence. A crucial lead surfaced when Irene, Mengele's first wife, filed for divorce years earlier. She had to list his address, which pointed to Buenos Aires. Armed with that paperwork, pressure mounted. On June 10, 1959, West Germany issued a more detailed international warrant, even offered a reward. But politics dulled the edge. West Germany wanted to project a modern, democratic image and avoid reopening deep wounds. Many officials had Nazi-era pasts. Argentina initially refused extradition, claiming the fugitive had moved. By the time Argentina approved the request on June 30, 1959, Mengele had already slipped into Paraguay, almost certainly tipped off. He sold his stake in Farma, transferred assets to his wife, and reemerged as Francisco Fischer, a Paraguayan veterinarian sheltered by dictator Alfredo Stroessner's regime, which readily provided papers and citizenship to German émigrés. On November 27, 1959, he became a Paraguayan citizen safe from extradition under local law. Mengele carried many of his research notes. Sympathizers in Paraguay hinted at buying them. Believing experiments on living human beings made his data uniquely reliable. Unbeknownst to him, Israel's Mossad had broader priorities: state survival and countering Egyptian missile programs, staffed by ex-Nazi experts. Even so, in May 1960, Mossad abducted Adolf Eichmann, who had been living as Ricardo Clement and working at a Mercedes-Benz plant outside Buenos Aires. After hours of interrogation, Eichmann confirmed that Mengele was likely still in Argentina. Though he claimed no current address, Mossad sketched a second snatch operation for Mengele while Eichmann was still in custody, but the risk was extreme. Agents spoke poor Spanish, carried false passports, and operated in a city with 250,000 German émigrés, including many former Nazis. Surveillance turned up nothing. The team withdrew. Eichmann was exfiltrated to Israel on May 20th and publicly announced on May 23rd. He was executed in December 1961. By then, Mossad had lost Mengele's trail. Zviaharoni, who helped identify Eichmann, returned to South America under cover as a historian of the SS, visiting Argentina, Uruguay, Bolivia, and Chile. Leads pointed to Paraguay again, only for Mengele to vanish to Brazil, with help from ex-Luftwaffe ace Hans Ulrich Rudel. He acquired fresh papers as Peter H. Bergman, moved frequently, and relied on a network of sympathizers. In 1962, Mossad detained a Dutch SS officer, Willem Sassen, in Buenos Aires and used pressure and psychological tactics to extract a claim. Mengele was near Sao Paulo, Brazil, a rural coffee farm 50 kilometers outside the city in a German émigré enclave, became the focus. The team even spotted a mustached man with a telltale gap between his front teeth, likely Mengele. But headquarters demanded stronger proof. Shortly after, Egypt test-fired new missiles. Mossad pivoted to sabotage that program. The Mengele hunt was shelved. The Nazi hunting unit was quietly dissolved. Mengele again escaped justice. With family funds and backing from a Hungarian émigré couple, he managed a coffee plantation and cattle operation outside Sao Paulo. His surgical skill betrayed him when he flawlessly repaired a farmhand's hernia, confirming he was no ordinary manager. Years of flight-fed paranoia. He built a rickety watchtower, scanned for intruders with binoculars, kept guard dogs, and bullied the Hungarian couple, even meddling in how they raised their child. To hide the gap in his teeth, he grew a beard, then compulsively chewed and swallowed strands of it. Impacted hair caused a dangerous intestinal blockage. As money from Germany dwindled in the late 1960s, he sank into poverty and ill health. Media sensationalism turned him into a mythic villain in a jungle fortress, ensuring his crimes weren't forgotten and spurring freelance Nazi hunters. B. Klarsfeld slapped West German Chancellor Kurt Georg Kiesinger in 1968 and denounced his Nazi past, later traveling to Paraguay in 1984 to demand action on Mengele. Simon Wiesenthal, the famed Nazi hunter and Holocaust survivor, constantly broadcast claims that Mengele still lived, offering rewards and baiting authorities with alleged addresses. A public pressure campaign that forced periodic motions from West Germany, though often half-hearted. In February 1985, Holocaust survivors convened a trial in absentia in Jerusalem. 30 Auschwitz survivors testified in detail about Mengele's experiments and selections. A 7-member panel, jurists, historians, and medical experts issued a judgment urging the world to capture him so he could face real justice, and called for eternal remembrance to prevent such crimes from returning. International outrage pushed West German, U.S., and Israeli officials to meet in Bonn in May 1985 to restart the hunt. A break came when a former employee of the Mengele family firm, Hans Sedlmayr, drunkenly bragged he had long aided Mengele. German authorities raided his home on May 31, 1985, and behind a false wall found letters from Mengele, including one implying a mutual friend had died in 1979, after which no more letters arrived. Investigators traced the trail to Sao Paulo. Brazilian federal police, led by Romu Tuma, raided the home of a German-Brazilian family named Bossert. At first they denied everything until a makeshift shrine and other evidence forced a confession. In the 1970s, a man using documents of one Wolfgang Gerhard had died by drowning at Bershka Beach in 1979 and was buried under that false name. It was Josef Mengele. Officials announced the find. Handwriting experts matched letters to Mengele. Skeptics, including Wiesenthal and Klarsfeld, demanded proof. Why had the family kept incriminating letters? Why didn't the Mengeles declare his death 6 years earlier? What about reported sightings in Paraguay as late as 1984? Public confidence faltered. Forensic work proceeded under heavy guard. Early skeletal exams found pelvic injuries consistent with his wartime wounds. Critics scolded Brazil's initial handling televised exhumation. Chaotic scenes, but international experts were eventually admitted. In Germany, prosecutors hit dead ends as the family stonewalled until his son Rolf publicly stated the remains were indeed his father's, and that tests would confirm it, claiming secrecy had protected those who sheltered him. In the 1980s, only traditional forensics were available: skull photo superimposition, bone measurements, dental comparisons. Results were consistent, but not definitive. In the early 1990s, mitochondrial DNA techniques finally settled it. The remains were Josef Mengele's. Witness accounts filled in the end. In 1979, he rented a seaside house near Bershka, rarely went out, then inexplicably swam one afternoon, was caught by currents, suffered a stroke while returning, and died. It was an easy death for a man whose crimes were anything but. Letters he wrote late in life painted himself as misunderstood, pining for a lost Germany and sneering at modern society and art. He never truly reckoned with his atrocities, referencing Jews as the chosen people in scare quotes and condemning colleagues' remorse. He even praised South African apartheid as a way to prevent mixing. Many other Nazi criminals also died free in South America. The inventor of mobile gas chambers, responsible for at least 100,000 murders, died in Chile in 1984. Another SS officer died in Paraguay in 1977. And Gustav Wagner the Beast died in Brazil in 1980, after courts refused extradition on technicalities. For millions murdered and families destroyed, justice was often absent. The lesson is stark. Memory is necessary because justice does not always prevail over calculated indifference.